My father banned me from celebrating my birthday ever again after my brother's death. So I ruined his retirement celebration the same way. When I turned 15, my older brother Danny died in a motorcycle accident on my birthday. It was horrible and tragic, and nobody felt like celebrating anything for months. I understood completely when we skipped my birthday that year. I didn't want to party either. But when my 16th birthday came around, my father sat me down and said we would never celebrate my birthday again because it was now Danny's death day. Not that year, not when the grief was fresh, but never again. He said acknowledging my birth on that day was disrespectful to Danny's memory. My mom tried to suggest we celebrate on a different day, but Dad said that would be pretending the real day didn't exist, and we couldn't hide from reality. So 16 came and went with nothing. 17, 18, 19, all just Danny's death anniversary. Dad would spend the day looking at Danny's photos and visiting his grave while I sat at home pretending I wasn't getting a year older. My friends would text happy birthday, and I'd delete them before Dad saw because he'd lecture me about making the day about myself. When I turned 21, my roommates at college threw me a surprise party. Dad found out from a photo someone tagged me in and drove 3 hours to scream at me about dishonoring my brother. He told all my friends I was selfish for celebrating while Danny was dead. He made such a scene that campus security had to remove him. My roommate Jenna asked if my dad was mentally stable, and I didn't know how to answer. For my 25th birthday, my boyfriend Kyle wanted to take me to dinner. Just a quiet dinner. Nothing that celebrated anything. Just food on a day that happened to be my birthday. Dad found out because he'd been tracking my location through my phone and showed up at the restaurant with Danny's urn. He put it on our table and said Danny should be included if we were going to be selfish. Kyle left me 2 weeks later saying my family was too intense. Dad said it was for the best, since Kyle didn't understand real loss. My 30th birthday was the breaking point. I'd been in therapy for 2 years working through the guilt and shame Dad had programmed into me. My therapist said it was okay to exist on my birthday, that Danny wouldn't want me to disappear every year. I decided to have a small gathering at my apartment. Just 5 close friends for wine and cheese. Dad wasn't invited or informed. Somehow he found out, probably from stalking my credit card for party supplies. He showed up with my mom and Danny's high school girlfriend Lisa, who he'd stayed weirdly close with. He stood in my living room and announced that I was spitting on Danny's grave by eating cheese on his death day. Lisa cried about her lost love who she'd dated for 3 months freshman year. Mom stood there silent like always. My friend Helen asked Dad when Danny's actual birthday was, and Dad said March 15th. Helen asked if he celebrated that day, and Dad said of course. They honored Danny's life every year on his birthday. Helen asked how that was different from me having a birthday, and Dad said Danny died on my birthday, so it was his day now. Helen, who was a grief counselor, told Dad he needed serious therapy, and he called her a heartless bitch who didn't understand a father's pain. After that disaster, I started planning. See, Dad was retiring at 60, and had been planning his retirement party for 2 years. He'd booked a country club, hired a band, and invited 300 people. He'd talked about it constantly, how it would be the celebration of his career, his legacy, his contributions to the company. He'd picked the date specially because it was exactly 35 years from when he started at the firm. The date was March 15th, Danny's birthday. I called the country club and confirmed the date. I contacted the band and verified they were booked for March 15th. I reached out to Dad's assistant and made sure all the invitations said March 15th. Then I waited. The week before his retirement party, I sent flowers to Danny's grave with a card that said, "Thinking of you on your birthday, March 15th, from your loving sister." I made sure Dad would see them when he did his weekly visit. I watched him read the card 3 times before it clicked. His retirement party was on Danny's birthday. He called me panicking, saying he'd made a terrible mistake with the date. I said, wow, that was really disrespectful to Danny's memory to throw a party on his birthday. Dad said it was different because it wasn't intentional. I said, but now that he knew, he'd have to cancel, because celebrating anything on Danny's birthday would be spitting on his memory. Dad said the party wasn't about birthdays. I said neither were any of mine, but that hadn't mattered. Dad tried to explain that deposits were non-refundable. People had traveled from out of state. The company had made arrangements. I said those sounded like selfish concerns when Danny was dead. He said I was being ridiculous, and I repeated back every single thing he'd said to me for 15 years. That acknowledging any celebration on that day was disgusting. That Danny deserved better than a father who partied on his birthday. That real parents would never allow joy on such a sacred day. Dad hung up and threw his party anyway. I made sure to attend with Danny's urn that I'd borrowed from Mom. I walk into the country club carrying Danny's urn in both hands. The weight feels heavier than it should. Like 15 years of silence has somehow gotten pressed into the metal. The parking lot is packed with cars I recognize from Dad's office parties over the years. I can hear music coming from inside, the band running through sound checks. My hands are shaking a little, but I take 3 deep breaths like my therapist taught me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I practiced this moment in her office last week. talking through what I'd do and how I'd feel. She asked if I was sure about this, and I told her I'd never been more sure of anything. I walk toward the entrance and pull open the heavy glass door. The lobby is all marble floors and fancy chandeliers. A sign on an easel says, Torres Retirement Celebration, with an arrow pointing down the hall. I follow it, my shoes clicking on the floor. The banquet hall is decorated with navy and gold balloons everywhere. Photos of Dad's career cover the walls in fancy frames. There's him shaking hands with the company president, him getting some award, him at the office parties looking important. A huge banner stretches across the back wall reading, Congratulations on 35 years. The room is already half full of people in suits and dresses, holding drinks and talking in clusters. I spot Dad near the bar talking to his boss, the one who always sends us a Christmas card. Dad looks proud and relaxed in his new navy suit, the one Mom helped him pick out last month. He's laughing at something his boss said, his hand moving as he tells some story. Then he sees me. His eyes land on the urn in my hands and his face goes completely white, like all the blood just drained out of it in 1 second. He almost drops his drink. His boss notices and turns to look at what Dad is staring at. Dad rushes over, moving faster than I've seen him move in years. He tries to grab my arm to pull me aside, but I step back. I speak loud enough for the people nearby to hear. I brought Danny since we're celebrating on his birthday. Several people turn to look. Dad's boss is still watching, his face confused. He asks if everything is okay. Dad stammers something about a family misunderstanding. His hand is on my shoulder now, physically trying to turn me back toward the door. He's blocking me from going further into the room. His face is red and his voice comes out in a harsh whisper asking what I think I'm doing. I step around him and walk calmly toward the gift table. It's set up near the entrance with a white tablecloth and a big card box. Wrapped presents are stacked on one side. I place Danny's urn right in the center of the table, moving a gift basket aside to make room. The urn is dark bronze with Danny's name and dates engraved on the front. Dad follows me, staying close. He's whispering frantically that I need to leave right now, that this is completely inappropriate, that people are staring. I turn and ask him loudly how this is different from when he brought the urn to my birthday dinner with Kyle. More heads turn our direction. A woman in a green dress stops mid-sentence to watch. A man with gray hair nudges his wife and points. Mom appears from the bathroom hallway and freezes when she sees the urn sitting there on display. The circle of guests watching our confrontation is growing. She looks between Dad and me with panic in her eyes. Her mouth opens like she's going to say something, but nothing comes out. Then she does what she always does. She says nothing. She just stands there with her hands clasped in front of her blue dress. I feel a flash of anger at her silence even now, after everything. But I keep my focus on Dad. His face is turning from white to red, the color creeping up his neck. Dad's sister Vivian approaches from across the room. Her voice is sharp when she asks what's going on. Dad tries to explain that I'm having some kind of episode, that I'm not well, that I should probably leave. But I stay calm and tell Vivian that Dad scheduled his retirement party on Danny's birthday, that I'm just making sure our brother is included in the celebration. Vivian's expression changes. First concern, then understanding, then something that looks almost like satisfaction. Her eyes move from the urn to Dad's face and back again. The band stops their sound check and the room gets quieter. More people are noticing the tension now. The conversations are dying down as guests turn to watch. Dad's colleague Keith comes over to ask if we need help. Dad insists everything is fine while shooting me looks that would have scared me a year ago. But I've spent too many hours in therapy working through his control to let those looks work anymore. I stand next to the gift table with my hand resting on Danny's urn. My heart is racing, but I feel strangely calm, like I'm watching this happen from somewhere outside my body. I announce to the growing crowd that I just want to honor my brother on his birthday. That family is so important, that we should never celebrate anything on days that belong to people we've lost. Dad's face goes from red to purple as he realizes what I'm doing. I'm using his exact words, the same lectures he gave me for 15 years. Several guests look confused, whispering to each other. Others are starting to piece together that something deeper is happening here. A woman asks her husband what's going on, and he shrugs. Mom finally moves. She comes over and tries to take my arm. Her voice is quiet, almost begging. Please not here. Please not today. Please just come outside and we can talk. I ask her where she was when Dad crashed my 21st birthday. Where she was at my 25th when he showed up at the restaurant. Where she was at my 30th when he brought Lisa to my apartment. She flinches like I've slapped her. Her hand drops from my arm. Vivian is watching this exchange with her arms crossed. I can see her nodding slightly, like she's been waiting years for someone to say this out loud. The band leader approaches Dad holding his phone. He asks if they should start playing, trying to break the tension. Dad tells him to wait. His voice sounds tired suddenly. He turns back to me and says we can talk about this later. That he'll cancel the party if that's what I want. That we can work this out. I tell him the deposits are non-refundable. That people traveled from out of state. That the company made arrangements. I'm repeating his exact words back to him, the same justifications he used when I begged him to move his party date last week. Dad's face looks like he might explode right there in front of everyone, his jaw working but no words coming out. The band leader backs away slowly, sensing this isn't his problem to solve. More guests filter through the entrance, pulling off coats and looking for the bar, completely unaware they're walking into a family war zone. I keep my hand on Danny's urn, feeling the cool metal under my palm, grounding myself in the physical reality of what I'm doing. A tall man in a gray suit pushes through the crowd near the entrance, scanning the room until his eyes land on Dad. He stops moving, his expression shifting from confused to concerned as he takes in the scene. The urn on the gift table. Dad's purple face. Mom's tears. My calm stance next to the focal point of everyone's attention. The man walks over slowly and looks between Dad and me. Raymond asks what he missed, his voice careful like he's approaching something that might bite. Vivian appears at his elbow and fills him in quickly, her words clipped and efficient. Raymond's confusion melts into something harder as he processes that Dad scheduled his retirement party on Danny's birthday. His eyes move to the urn, then to Dad, then back to the urn. He shakes his head slowly, and I can see him putting together 15 years of family gatherings where I wasn't quite present. Birthdays that passed without acknowledgement. Dad's iron grip on grief. Raymond looks at me and nods once, a gesture of understanding that makes my throat tight. The entrance doors keep opening and more people arrive, laughing and calling greetings to each other, oblivious to the tension crackling through the banquet hall. They see the decorations and the band and the open bar, expecting a normal celebration. Then they see the urn. Conversations die mid-sentence. A woman in a red dress stops so suddenly her husband nearly walks into her back. She stares at Danny's urn sitting among the wrapped gifts, and her mouth forms a small O of confusion. Her husband follows her gaze and his eyebrows pull together. They look around for context, for someone to explain why there's a funeral urn at a retirement party. Dad's boss approaches again, his earlier friendly smile replaced with professional concern. He suggests quietly that maybe we should move to a private room to sort this out, gesturing toward a hallway that probably leads to offices or storage. Dad agrees immediately, desperately, reaching for any escape from the public spectacle his celebration is becoming. But I stay planted next to the gift table, my hand still resting on the urn. I tell them I'm fine right here, my voice pleasant and calm. Dad's boss looks between us, clearly calculating how much drama his company wants associated with this event. He backs away slowly, probably planning to call someone about this situation. I greet the next group of arrivals with a warm smile, thanking them for coming to celebrate on March 15th. I make sure to emphasize the date, letting it hang in the air between us. An older couple approaches hesitantly, and the woman offers condolences about Danny, mentioning she heard about the tragedy years ago when she worked with Dad. I accept her sympathy graciously, nodding and saying it's been 15 years today actually. Her face changes as she does the math, realizing she's at a retirement party scheduled on the anniversary of the guest of honor's son's death. She looks at Dad with new eyes, confusion, and something like judgment settling into her expression. Her husband shifts uncomfortably and suggests they find their table. Dad watches helplessly from across the room as I turn his carefully planned celebration into a wake. Every guest I greet learns the date's significance. Every condolence I accept reinforces that we're celebrating on a death day. The irony sits perfect and sharp in my chest, making it hard to breathe but impossible to stop. His party is becoming exactly what he made my birthdays into for 15 years. A day to mourn instead of celebrate. A day where joy feels wrong and selfish. A day that belongs to Danny's death instead of anyone's life. The entrance doors open again and a woman walks in with a confused expression, followed by a man who looks equally puzzled about why they're here. The woman is Lisa, Danny's high school girlfriend from 15 years ago, the one Dad stayed weirdly close with. She sees the urn and her whole face crumples into the performance I've seen too many times. The theatrical grief over a boy she dated for 3 months when she was 15. Her husband looks uncomfortable, his hand on her elbow as she starts crying. He asks her quietly how she even knows these people, and I can hear the strain in his voice like this isn't the first time he's questioned her connection to our family. Dad rushes over to intercept them before I can say anything, trying to steer Lisa away from the gift table and the growing crowd of witnesses. He's attempting damage control on multiple fronts now, his retirement party fracturing into separate crisis points he can't manage simultaneously. Lisa's husband pulls away from Dad's guiding hand and repeats his question louder, wanting to know why his wife was invited to a stranger's retirement party. Dad stammers something about old family friends while Lisa sobs into her hands, her shoulders shaking with practiced intensity. Vivian touches my elbow and pulls me a few steps away from the gift table, creating a small bubble of private conversation in the chaos. She tells me she's been waiting 15 years for someone to call Dad out on his behavior. Her voice is low and fierce, years of frustration compressed into each word. She says after Danny died, Dad turned his grief into a weapon and used it to control everyone around him. That she watched him make every family gathering about Danny's absence instead of the people who were present. That she saw what he did to me and felt powerless to stop it, because grief gave him immunity from criticism. I feel validated hearing someone else name the dysfunction I've lived with for so long. But I also feel sad that even his own sister saw what was happening and couldn't intervene. Vivian squeezes my arm and says she's proud of me for standing up today, for refusing to disappear anymore. Her support feels like oxygen after years of holding my breath. I nod because speaking might break the careful control I'm maintaining over my emotions. The country club coordinator approaches with a clipboard and a nervous smile, looking between Dad and the growing crowd of confused guests. She asks if we're ready to start the program, clearly hoping structure will somehow normalize whatever is happening. Dad makes a decision, his face settling into determined lines. He announces loudly that yes, let's begin, projecting his voice across the banquet hall. He's hoping that moving forward with the schedule will override the tension, that people will focus on speeches and dinner instead of the urn and the family drama unfolding around it. I take a seat at a table near the front, choosing a spot with clear sightlines to both Dad and the gift table. I leave Danny's urn prominently displayed where every guest will see it when they look toward the speakers. Vivian and Raymond join me at my table instead of sitting with the family, a deliberate choice that sends its own message to anyone paying attention. Other guests settle into their assigned seats, whispering to each other and shooting glances toward our table and the urn. The room gradually quiets as the program begins. Dad's boss walks to the microphone at the front of the room, his prepared speech in hand. He talks about Dad's contributions to the company over 35 years, his dedication and reliability, his mentorship of younger employees. The words sound hollow to me. Knowing the person being honored drove 3 hours to scream at college students about a birthday party. I wonder if these coworkers know about Dad tracking my location through my phone, if they know about the restaurant scene with Kyle, if they know about any of the public humiliations he subjected me to while maintaining his professional reputation at work. The speech continues with anecdotes about projects and achievements, painting a picture of a devoted employee and respected colleague. I sit quietly, my presence and the urn speaking louder than any interruption could. Let them hear about his dedication while looking at the funeral urn at his retirement party. Let them wonder about the disconnect between the man being praised and the family dysfunction on display. My silence is more powerful than any speech I could give. Dinner service begins and servers navigate between tables with salads and bread baskets. The people at my table eat quietly at first, unsure how to navigate the obvious tension. Then a woman across from me asks carefully about Danny, her voice gentle like she's approaching something fragile. I tell her he died 15 years ago today, actually, watching her face change as the date significance clicks into place. Another person asks if that's why there's an urn, and I explain that Dad wanted to make sure Danny was included in today's celebration since it's his birthday. The woman's fork stops halfway to her mouth and she sets it down slowly, her appetite apparently gone. Mom sits at the family table across the room looking miserable, barely touching her food while Dad works the room between courses. He moves from table to table, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, trying to act like everything is normal. But his smile looks forced and his eyes keep darting toward me and the urn. Vivian and Raymond sitting with me instead of at the family table is a choice everyone notices. Other relatives whisper and shoot looks in our direction, clearly picking sides without knowing the full story. The room divides into camps without anyone saying it out loud. During a break between courses, Mom stands from the family table and walks over to me. Her movements are slow and uncertain, like she's walking through water. She sits in the empty chair next to me and her voice shakes when she asks what I want from this. The question hangs between us, loaded with 15 years of silence and enabling. I tell her I want her to admit she watched Dad destroy me for 15 years and did nothing. That she stood silent while he made me feel guilty for existing. That her neutrality was actually taking his side every single time. Mom starts crying quietly, tears running down her face without the dramatic sobs Lisa performs. She says she didn't know what to do. That Dad's grief was so big it consumed everything and everyone. That she tried to suggest alternatives, but he would rage and she'd back down to keep peace. I tell her that's not an excuse for letting him consume me too. That protecting herself by sacrificing me wasn't motherhood. It was cowardice. Her face crumples, but I don't take the words back because they're true and we both know it. Mom's hands shake as she picks at her napkin, tearing tiny pieces that pile up on the tablecloth like snow. She admits she tried suggesting different celebration dates over the years, quiet attempts during breakfast or late at night when Dad seemed calm, but he would rage and she would back down to keep peace in the house. Her voice drops to almost nothing when she says she thought I was strong enough to handle it, that I seemed fine going off to college and building my own life away from home. The words hit me like a slap because she confused survival with being okay. I tell her I wasn't fine, I was surviving, and there's a difference she never bothered to learn because learning would have required her to actually do something about it. She flinches but doesn't argue because we both know I'm right. Vivian appears beside our table and pulls up a chair without asking, her presence solid and certain in a way Mom has never been. She looks directly at Mom and says her silence made her complicit in Dad's abuse, using the word we've all been dancing around for 15 years. Mom jerks back like Vivian slapped her and starts protesting that Dad was just grieving, that he needed support, that losing Danny broke something in him. Vivian cuts her off mid-sentence and starts listing specific incidents she witnessed over the years. The college party disruption where campus security got involved, the restaurant scene with the urn that ended my relationship, the 30th birthday ambush with Lisa crying over a 3-month high school romance from 15 years ago. Each example lands like a hammer blow, and Mom shrinks further into her chair with every word. I sit there feeling grateful for Vivian's clarity, even as I watch Mom crumble under the weight of truth she spent years avoiding. Sometimes having a witness matters more than having an apology. Dad materializes at our table looking wild around the eyes, his careful party persona cracking as he demands to know what we're discussing. His voice carries that edge of control slipping away, the sound of a man watching his carefully constructed celebration turn into something he can't manage. Vivian doesn't even look at him when she tells him to back off and let the women talk, her tone leaving absolutely no room for argument or negotiation. Dad opens his mouth to push back, but something in Vivian's expression stops him cold. He retreats 3 steps but hovers nearby like a shark circling prey, unable to fully let go of managing the situation even as it spirals beyond his control. I can see him watching us, calculating, trying to figure out how to regain command of his own retirement party. A woman approaches our table hesitantly, someone I vaguely recognize from family gatherings years ago. She introduces herself as Sarah, my cousin from Dad's side, and asks if I'm okay with genuine concern in her voice. She admits she always thought it was weird that we never celebrated my birthday anymore after Danny died, but she assumed it was a private family decision that wasn't her business to question. I look at her carefully and explain it wasn't a decision. It was a decree handed down by Dad with no discussion or compromise allowed. Sarah's face changes as she processes the distinction between choosing something together and having something forced on you. She looks genuinely shocked and asks how long this has been going on. 15 years, I tell her. Since I was 16. She glances at the urn on the gift table and then back at me, understanding clicking into place about why I brought it here today. The band starts playing again, launching into an upbeat song that feels jarring against the tension hanging over the room. Some guests move to the dance floor in small groups, trying to salvage the party atmosphere and pretend everything is normal. But there's an undercurrent of confusion and discomfort that won't go away no matter how loud the music gets. Small groups cluster together, whispering urgently, glancing toward our table in the urn, trying to piece together what's really happening here. Dad's retirement celebration has become a referendum on his parenting instead of a tribute to his career, exactly as I intended when I borrowed Danny's urn this morning. The party continues around us, but it's hollow now, stripped of the joy and celebration Dad spent 2 years planning. A man in an expensive suit sits down across from me during a slow song, introducing himself as one of Dad's colleagues from work. He asks directly what happened between me and my father, cutting through the polite pretense everyone else is maintaining. I give him the short version about 15 years of banned birthdays, public humiliations at college and restaurants, being made to feel guilty for existing on the anniversary of Danny's death. I watch his expression shift from curiosity to discomfort as the story unfolds, his face tightening with each new detail. He admits Dad always seemed intense at work, the kind of guy who took everything seriously and never quite relaxed. But he had no idea it extended to his family life like this. No idea there was a daughter being systematically erased while Dad played devoted father to a dead son. The colleague leans forward and shares something that makes my stomach drop. Dad talked constantly about Danny at work, keeping a photo on his desk and mentioning him in conversations about family and loss and what really matters in life. But in all the years they worked together, all the lunches and after-work drinks and company events, Dad never once mentioned having a daughter. Not once. I feel the familiar ache of erasure wash over me. That special pain of being deleted from your own father's narrative because you had the audacity to keep existing after your brother died. The colleague looks genuinely disturbed by his own revelation, realizing he's been working alongside someone for years without knowing this whole other dimension of dysfunction. He apologizes for not knowing, for not asking questions, though none of this is his fault. The music fades and the program coordinator announces it's time for speeches. Dad walks to the microphone with hands that shake slightly as he adjusts the stand. He thanks everyone for coming and launches into a prepared speech about his career journey, talking about his first day at the firm 35 years ago and the mentors who shaped him. But halfway through, he pivots suddenly to talking about Danny, how losing his son taught him what really matters in life beyond work and achievement. His voice breaks with emotion as he describes the pain of losing a child and how it changed his perspective on everything. I feel Vivian tense beside me as Dad weaponizes Danny's memory again, using our brother's death as emotional currency to make himself look deep and vulnerable. The guests lean forward in their seats, moved by his apparent honesty, completely unaware they're watching a performance. Dad continues his speech about how Danny's death made him value every moment and never take family for granted. Tears stream down his face as he talks about cherishing the people you love while they're still here, about not letting work consume you at the expense of relationships. The guests look genuinely moved by his vulnerability, and several people are wiping their own eyes. The irony is so thick I could choke on it. Here's my father giving a speech about valuing family and not taking people for granted while his living daughter sits 15 feet away with her brother's urn, having been systematically excluded from his life for 15 years. I wait quietly for my moment, letting him dig his own grave with his hypocrisy, while the audience eats it up. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone keep talking until they've created the perfect trap for themselves. Dad finishes his speech to enthusiastic applause, and several people in the front rows are openly crying now. The coordinator takes the microphone and asks if anyone else wants to say a few words in honor of the retiree. Before Dad can shut it down or redirect attention, I stand up from my table. The room notices immediately, and conversations stop mid-sentence as I walk toward the front. Dad's face goes completely pale as I take the microphone from the coordinator's hand, his eyes wide with panic as he realizes he's lost control of his own event. The room quiets with anticipation, 300 people waiting to hear what the daughter with the urn has to say. I look out at all these faces and feel strangely calm, ready to finally tell the truth in front of witnesses who can't be dismissed or controlled. I thank everyone for coming to celebrate with us on March 15th, Danny's birthday. My voice stays steady as I talk about how much Danny meant to our family, how he was funny and kind and the best older brother anyone could ask for. I describe the motorcycle accident 15 years ago today that took him from us, how it devastated our family and changed everything forever. I watch Dad's face shift from panic to confusion because I'm not attacking him yet. I'm just talking about Danny like he does at every family gathering. Several guests nod sympathetically, and a few women dab at their eyes with napkins. Dad stands frozen near his table, his hand gripping his champagne glass so hard his knuckles turn white. Mom looks between us with wide eyes, probably wondering where I'm going with this speech that sounds almost respectful. The room is quiet except for my voice through the microphone, everyone listening to what they think is a loving tribute to my dead brother. Then I shift my tone and explain how Dad decided that my birthday, which happens to fall on the same day Danny died, could never be celebrated again. I tell them about turning 16 and being informed that acknowledging my birth on that day was disrespectful to Danny's memory. I describe 17, 18, 19, all the birthdays that came and went with nothing while Dad spent each day at Danny's grave, and I sat at home pretending I wasn't getting older. My voice gets stronger as I talk about deleting happy birthday texts from friends before Dad could see them and lecture me about making the day about myself. I mention my 21st birthday when Dad drove 3 hours to my college and screamed at my roommates that I was dishonoring my brother, making such a scene that campus security had to remove him. Several guests gasp, and I see people exchanging shocked looks. Dad's face goes from confused to horrified as he realizes what I'm doing. I keep talking, describing my 25th birthday when my boyfriend Kyle took me to dinner and Dad showed up with Danny's urn, putting it on our table and saying Danny should be included if we were going to be selfish. I watch recognition dawn on faces around the room as guests start understanding the pattern. Kyle left me 2 weeks later because my family was too intense, I tell them, and Dad said it was for the best since Kyle didn't understand real loss. Mom has her hand over her mouth and tears are streaming down her face. I described my 30th birthday just a few months ago when I tried to have 5 friends over for wine. And Cheese, how Dad showed up, were uninvited with Mom and Danny's high school girlfriend Lisa to announce I was spitting on Danny's grave by eating cheese on his death day. The room goes completely silent now. Not even the sound of silverware or glasses. Just 300 people staring at me and then at Dad. I use Dad's exact words, repeating them into the microphone so everyone can hear the things he's said to me for 15 years. I talk about how we can't hide from reality by celebrating on convenient dates, how that would be pretending the real day doesn't exist. I explain how acknowledging any joy on sacred days is disgusting, how it shows a lack of respect for the dead. I tell them that real family members would never allow happiness when someone we love is gone, that celebrating anything on Danny's birthday or death day is spitting on his memory. Several guests look absolutely horrified now as they realize I'm quoting the guest of honor, using his own philosophy against him at his own party. Dad stands frozen near his table, his mouth opening and closing but no sound coming out because anything he says will prove my point. His boss is staring at him with a strange expression, probably realizing the man he's worked with for 35 years has some serious issues he didn't know about. I can see Keith sitting at a table near the back, his arms crossed and his face dark with anger on my behalf. Vivian has tears on her face, but she's also nodding, finally hearing someone say out loud what she's known for years. Raymond is watching Dad with disgust, his jaw tight and his hands clenched on the table. The band members have stopped pretending to adjust their instruments and are just watching this family drama unfold on stage. I finish my speech by gesturing to the gift table where Danny's urn sits among the wrapped presents and cards. I say that I brought Danny here today because if we're going to celebrate on his birthday, He should definitely be included in the festivities. Isn't it wonderful, I tell the room, that Dad finally understands that some dates are too important to let logistics get in the way. I mention the non-refundable deposits, the out-of-state guests, the company arrangements, all the excuses Dad used when I begged him to change his party date after he realized it was Danny's birthday. I thank everyone again for helping us honor Danny on his special day, my voice dripping with the same fake sweetness Dad used when he crashed my celebrations. Then I set the microphone down gently on the podium and walk back to my seat while the entire room sits in complete shocked silence. No one claps, no one moves. 300 people just frozen in their chairs processing what they heard. I sit down next to Vivian and fold my hands in my lap, feeling strangely calm despite my racing heart. Dad is still standing near his table looking like someone punched him in the stomach, his carefully planned celebration completely destroyed by the truth. The MC rushes to the microphone looking panicked, clearly not trained for this kind of family drama at a retirement party. He stammers something about taking a short break and signals desperately to the band to start playing. The music starts up way too loud and way too cheerful for the mood in the room, some upbeat jazz number that sounds absurd after what everyone just heard. Guests immediately start whispering to each other, their voices getting louder as the shock wears off and the gossip begins. I can see people pulling out phones, probably texting friends about the wildest retirement party drama they've ever witnessed. Some are definitely Googling my dad's name or trying to find more information about what they just saw. A woman at the table next to ours leans over and asks Vivian if what I said was true, and Vivian nods grimly and says every word of it. Dad stumbles toward the bar and orders something, his hands shaking as he takes the glass. He looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 minutes, his face gray and his shoulders slumped. His boss follows him to the bar, and I watch them have a conversation that looks increasingly tense, the boss's face getting redder as Dad tries to explain or defend himself. Mom sits at the family table sobbing into her napkin, while Dad's brother and sister-in-law sit stiffly beside her, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Several of Dad's cousins are arguing in hushed but angry voices, some pointing at me and some pointing at Dad. People start making excuses and heading for the exits, the party atmosphere completely dead. I watch a steady stream of guests stop by the coat check and then disappear into the parking lot, probably relieved to escape the tension. Dad's boss shakes his hand stiffly and says something that makes Dad's face crumple, then walks away without looking back. I'm guessing that conversation involved some realizations about Dad's judgment and stability, maybe some concerns about how this reflects on the company. A group of Dad's co-workers cluster near the door talking urgently, shooting looks back at our table and at Dad slumped at the bar. The country club staff look confused about whether to keep serving food or start cleaning up early. Mom gets up from the family table and walks unsteadily toward the bathroom, her face blotchy from crying. Several relatives follow her, probably to comfort her or get her side of the story. Dad's sister-in-law comes over to our table and tells Vivian they're leaving, that this is too much drama for a Sunday afternoon. Raymond stands up and tells her they're staying, that someone needs to support me after what I just did. She leaves anyway, dragging their teenage son with her while he tries to look back at the scene. The band stops playing mid-song as the band leader realizes nobody is listening or dancing. They're all too busy gossiping or leaving. I stand up and walk to the gift table to collect Danny's urn, my revenge complete but feeling emptier than I expected. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel is mixed with grief and exhaustion, a heavy weight in my chest that makes it hard to breathe. I pick up the urn carefully and hold it against my chest, feeling the cool metal through my dress. Vivian appears beside me and pulls me into a tight hug, her voice fierce in my ear as she tells me I did the right thing. She says someone needed to publicly name what Dad has been doing for 15 years. That silence was protecting him and hurting me. I hug her back and feel some of the tension leave my shoulders. Raymond comes over and shakes my hand formally, his grip firm and warm. He tells me he's proud of me for standing up for myself after all these years, that he wishes he'd done more to stop Dad when I was younger. I thank him quietly and tell him I understand why he kept his distance from our family's mess. A few of my younger cousins approach hesitantly and tell me they had no idea things were that bad, that they always thought the no birthday thing was weird, but didn't realize the extent of Dad's control. One of them, Sarah, hugs me and whispers that her mom always said something was off about how Dad handled grief, but nobody wanted to say anything. Keith catches up to me as I walk toward the exit, Danny's urn still clutched against my chest. He pulls a business card from his wallet and hands it to me, his voice low and serious. He says if I ever need someone to testify about Dad's behavior patterns at work, he's willing to talk. I'm surprised by the offer and ask him what he means. Keith explains that Dad talked about Danny constantly at the office, kept his photo on the desk, brought him up in meetings, but never once mentioned having a daughter. He says Dad's grief seemed performative sometimes, like he was using it to get sympathy or avoid accountability for mistakes. Keith tells me that several coworkers noticed Dad's intensity and mood swings, but nobody connected it to family problems this serious. I take the card and thank him, realizing that Dad's carefully constructed public image of the devoted grieving father has been permanently damaged by the truth. Keith squeezes my shoulder and tells me to take care of myself, that what I did took serious courage. I watch him walk back to his table to collect his wife, and I see them talking quietly as they leave, probably processing everything they just witnessed. I drive home to my apartment in silence, Danny's urn sitting in the passenger seat where I've buckled it in carefully. My hands shake on the steering wheel, and I have to pull over twice because my vision blurs with tears. When I finally get home, I carry the urn inside and sit on my couch, feeling the weight of what I've done settle over me like a heavy blanket. The satisfaction I expected is nowhere to be found, replaced by this weird mix of grief and exhaustion, and something that might be relief. I thought exposing Dad's hypocrisy would feel like victory, like justice, but instead I just feel tired and sad. I realize that publicly shaming him doesn't erase 15 years of pain, doesn't give me back all those birthdays, doesn't fix the damage he did to my sense of self-worth. I set Danny's urn on my coffee table and stare at it, wondering what my brother would think of what I just did. Would he be proud that I stood up for myself? Or would he be horrified that I used his memory as a weapon the same way Dad did? My therapist has an emergency line for crisis situations, and I pull out my phone with shaking hands. I need to talk to someone who understands trauma and family dysfunction, someone who can help me process this complicated mess of emotions. The phone rings 4 times before she picks up, and when I hear her voice, I start crying so hard I can barely explain what happened. Over the next few days, my phone explodes with messages from relatives taking sides in the family war I just started. Some call me cruel and vindictive for ruining Dad's special day, completely missing the irony that he ruined 15 of mine. Aunt Margaret sends a long text about respecting your elders and how I've dishonored the family name by airing private business in public. Uncle Tom says I should be ashamed of myself for embarrassing Dad in front of his coworkers and friends, that some things should stay private. I delete those messages without responding because there's no point arguing with people who've decided I'm the villain. But other messages come through that surprise me with their support. My younger cousins reach out one by one, telling me they always thought Dad was too controlling, but didn't know how bad it was. Sarah sends me a long message about how her own father has some similar controlling behaviors, and seeing me stand up to mine gave her courage to set boundaries. Vivian's daughter Maya calls me and says she's been following everything and thinks I'm brave, that someone needed to call out Dad's behavior publicly. She tells me stories about times Dad made inappropriate comments to her about grief and loss, trying to control how she processed her grandmother's death. Raymond's son texts to say his father has been talking about the retirement party all week, finally confronting decades of enabling Dad's dysfunction. Even some of Dad's coworkers reach out through social media, carefully worded messages saying they had no idea about the family situation, and they're sorry I went through that. Keith sends an email saying he talked to HR about Dad's behavior patterns at work, and there might be some conversations happening about his management style and treatment of employees. Dad's email arrives the next morning while I'm still in bed, the notification lighting up my phone at 6:30. I open it and start reading his long message about how I've embarrassed the family and destroyed his reputation at work. He calls me ungrateful and selfish, demanding I apologize publicly and return Danny's urn immediately. The words are familiar because I've heard variations of this speech my entire life. He's using the same manipulation tactics he always uses, making himself the victim and me the villain. I read through it twice, letting each accusation sink in without the guilt response he's trained into me. Then I delete it without responding because engaging with his manipulation only gives him power. My phone rings an hour later and Mom's name appears on the screen. I answer and hear her crying before she even says hello, her voice breaking as she begs me to smooth things over. She tells me Dad is talking about cutting me out of the will and turning the whole family against me, like those threats should make me fall in line. I take a breath and tell her gently that he already cut me out of the family 15 years ago, when he decided Danny's death was more important than my life. She goes silent on the other end, and I can hear her trying to process that truth. She doesn't know how to respond, because I've finally said out loud what we've all pretended wasn't happening. She makes a small noise like she wants to argue but can't find the words, then hangs up without saying goodbye. Vivian calls me that afternoon while I'm making lunch and asks how I'm holding up. I tell her honestly that I'm processing a lot of complicated feelings, but mostly I feel lighter than I have in years. She says she and Raymond have been having conversations with other family members about Dad's behavior patterns going back decades. Apparently, the birthday ban was just the most extreme example of his need to control narratives and center himself in every situation. She tells me stories I've never heard before about times Dad manipulated family events to make himself the focus, how he'd turn other people's celebrations into opportunities to talk about his own struggles. I feel less alone knowing others see it too, that I'm not crazy for recognizing the patterns. Vivian says several cousins have reached out to her saying they always felt uncomfortable around Dad, but didn't understand why until now. The retirement party incident gave them permission to name what they'd been feeling. Keith emails me a few days later with the subject line just saying, "Checking in." He tells me he had a conversation with Dad at work that didn't go well. Dad tried to spin the retirement party incident as me having mental health issues, painting himself as the concerned father dealing with an unstable daughter. But Keith pushed back and asked direct questions about the birthday ban, about why Dad would forbid his daughter from celebrating for 15 years. Dad got defensive and angry instead of denying anything, which basically confirmed everything I'd said at the party. Keith writes that several other co-workers have been asking questions too, wondering what kind of person would ban birthday celebrations. Dad's carefully built reputation at work is cracking, because the truth doesn't match the image he's projected. I spend the next week in therapy sessions working through the mess of feelings. My therapist helps me untangle the justified anger from the grief, showing me how they're connected but not the same thing. She points out that I'm grieving the loss of my family, but it's not a new loss. I didn't lose my family at the retirement party. I just finally acknowledged a loss that happened 15 years ago. The grief I'm feeling now is actually healthier than the suppression I've been living with because I'm allowing myself to feel it instead of pretending everything is fine. We talk about how revenge felt satisfying in the moment, but didn't heal the underlying trauma. She asks what I need going forward, and I realize I need space from my parents to figure out who I am without their dysfunction shaping me. Mom shows up at my apartment unannounced on a Tuesday morning, knocking until I answer the door. She looks exhausted and older than I've ever seen her, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair uncombed. I let her in and she sits on my couch without being invited, her hands shaking in her lap. She admits she's been afraid of Dad's anger for most of their marriage, that she learned early on to stay quiet and let him have his way. After Danny died, his grief gave him permission to be even more controlling and she didn't know how to stop it. She says she knows sorry isn't enough, but she doesn't know what else to offer. I sit across from her and feel a mix of sympathy and frustration, because this confession doesn't change what happened. She watched him destroy me for 15 years, and chose his comfort over my well-being every single time. I tell Mom I need her to make a choice about whether she's going to keep enabling Dad or start setting her own boundaries. She cries harder and says she doesn't know if she's strong enough to stand up to him after all these years. Part of me wants to comfort her, but I know that's just falling back into old patterns where I manage everyone else's emotions. I tell her that's honest at least, and I appreciate her not making promises she can't keep. She asks what this means for us, and I explain that I can't keep pretending we're a normal family. She nods like she understands, but her face shows she's hoping I'll change my mind if she just waits long enough. I make the difficult decision over the next few days to go low contact with my parents. I call Mom and tell her she can call me once a week, but I won't discuss Dad or family drama, and I won't attend any family events where Dad will be present. She agrees tearfully, understanding she's losing access to me because of choices she and Dad made together. I feel guilty, but also relieved because setting these boundaries means I can finally breathe. My therapist reminds me that guilt is a trained response from years of manipulation, not an accurate measure of whether I'm doing the right thing. Vivian invites me to meet her at a coffee shop downtown the following week. When I arrive, there's a young woman with her who looks familiar. Vivian introduces her daughter Maya, who's in college and has been following the family drama. Maya tells me she's always felt uncomfortable around my dad, and now understands why. She shares that at family gatherings, Dad would make comments about grief and loss that felt manipulative, like he was testing whether she'd agree with him. Vivian explains she's building a separate family circle that doesn't include my parents, gathering the relatives who see Dad's behavior for what it is. She wants me to be part of it, to have family connections that aren't toxic. I feel grateful and a little overwhelmed because I didn't expect anyone to choose me over Dad. Raymond reaches out through text a few days later and asks if we can talk. He calls that evening and offers to help me find a therapist who specializes in family estrangement, saying several of his friends have been through similar situations. He admits he distanced himself from Dad years ago, but feels guilty for not protecting me when I was younger. He says he saw how Dad treated me after Danny died but convinced himself it wasn't his place to interfere. I tell him I appreciate the acknowledgement even though it doesn't change the past. He asks if there's anything he can do now, and I tell him just being honest about what he witnessed helps me feel less alone. We talk for an hour about family patterns and how hard it is to break free from dysfunction when everyone else pretends it's normal. I find a support group that meets Tuesday evenings at a community center across town. The first night I walk in, 12 people sit in a circle of metal folding chairs, and the facilitator asks us to share our names and one word describing why we're there. When my turn comes, I say my name and the word boundaries, and 3 people nod like they already know my whole story. Over the next weeks, I hear about parents who weaponized religion, parents who used money as control, parents who made their children responsible for their emotional stability. A woman named Olivia describes how her mother showed up at her wedding were uninvited and made a scene, and I think about Dad crashing my birthday celebrations with Danny's urn. A man talks about his father tracking his location through his phone even after he turned 30, and I remember deleting happy birthday texts before Dad could see them. The patterns are so similar it's almost funny, except it's not funny at all. Nobody here thinks I'm exaggerating or being dramatic. Nobody suggests I just forgive and move on. They understand that some family relationships are broken beyond repair, and that accepting that truth isn't giving up. It's surviving. 3 weeks after the retirement party, my phone rings during the scheduled call time with Mom. Her voice sounds different, shaky but also clearer somehow. She tells me she's been seeing a therapist alone, not the couples counselor Dad wanted. The therapist asked her why she stayed with someone who made her so afraid, and Mom admits she sat in that office for 10 minutes unable to answer. She talks about how she convinced herself Dad's controlling behavior was grief, that if she just waited long enough he'd go back to being the man she married. But her therapist pointed out that maybe that man never existed, that maybe Danny's death just gave Dad permission to show who he'd always been. I can hear Mom crying softly, questioning 30 years of choices, realizing she sacrificed her daughter to keep peace with a man who never actually wanted peace. I tell her I'm glad she's getting help, that it's never too late to see clearly. But I also know that seeing clearly doesn't erase what already happened, doesn't give me back the 15 birthdays I lost, or the childhood I spent walking on eggshells. Mom asks if her going to therapy changes anything between us, and I have to tell her the truth, that it's a start, but it doesn't fix what's broken. The certified letter arrives on a Thursday. Dad's lawyer demands the immediate return of Danny's urn and threatens legal action for emotional distress, theft of family property, and intentional infliction of harm. The language is formal and aggressive, full of whereas and hereby, trying to intimidate me into compliance. I read it twice, feeling my hands shake with anger at Dad's audacity to claim I caused him emotional distress after what he put me through. I call a lawyer my therapist recommended, a woman who specializes in family law and estrangement cases. She reads the letter during our consultation and actually laughs, telling me Dad has zero legal standing. The urn technically belongs to my mother as next of kin. I borrowed it with her permission, and returning it to a retirement party doesn't constitute theft. As for emotional distress, she says good luck proving damages when he's the one who spent 15 years emotionally abusing his daughter. She advises me to return the urn through a neutral third party to avoid any further confrontation, and I agree. Keeping Danny's remains was never about possession. It was about making a point, and that point has been thoroughly made. I text Vivian and ask if she's willing to return the urn to my parents' house. She responds immediately that she'd be honored, that she's been looking for an excuse to tell Dad exactly what she thinks of him anyway. We meet at a coffee shop, and I hand over the urn wrapped carefully in bubble wrap. Vivian holds it gently and promises to deliver it when Dad's at work, to spare Mom another scene. 2 days later, she calls and reports that Mom answered the door looking exhausted and accepted the urn without much comment. Mom apparently admitted the house felt wrong without it, like Danny's absence was even more present when his remains weren't there. Vivian says Mom looked around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time, noticing how many photos of Danny cover every surface while photos of me have slowly disappeared over the years. I feel sad hearing this, sad that Danny's remains have become another weapon in our family's dysfunction, another thing Dad used to control and punish. I wonder what Danny would think about his urn being carried into a retirement party, about his death being used to justify 15 years of cruelty. I think he'd be horrified, but I'll never actually know because Dad made sure Danny's memory belongs to him now. My birthday approaches, and for the first time in 15 years, I'm planning to celebrate openly. I sit at my kitchen table making a guest list that includes Vivian, Raymond, their families, my friends from the support group, and people from work who've become genuine friends. The list notably excludes my parents, and writing it without their names feels both powerful and heartbreaking. I'm choosing my family now, picking people who actually want me to exist and thrive. I send out casual invitations for dinner at my apartment. Nothing fancy, just people gathering to acknowledge that I'm turning 31 and that's allowed. Vivian responds immediately with 3 party hat emojis and an offer to bring her famous lasagna. Raymond calls to ask if I'm sure I'm ready for this, and I tell him I've been ready for 15 years. My friend from support group asks if I need someone to stand guard at the door in case Dad shows up, and I laugh, but also appreciate that she understands the possibility. Planning this celebration feels like reclaiming something that was stolen from me, taking back ownership of a date that Dad declared belonged only to death and grief. The evening of my birthday, people start arriving at 6. Vivian shows up first with her lasagna and a chocolate cake she decorated herself with wonky frosting that says "Happy Birthday" in letters that slope downward. Raymond brings wine and his wife brings flowers, and my apartment fills with voices and laughter and the smell of good food. We eat sitting on my couch and floor because I don't have enough chairs, passing plates and refilling glasses and talking about everything except family drama. Around 8, Vivian stands up with her wine glass and clears her throat for attention. She gives a toast about reclaiming joy and refusing to let grief consume the living, about how the people we lose would want us to keep celebrating and existing and taking up space in the world. She looks directly at me when she says that loving someone who died doesn't mean we stop loving ourselves, that honoring their memory doesn't require erasing our own. Everyone raises their glasses and I feel tears on my face, but they're different tears than I've cried before. Less about loss and more about finally being seen. We bring out the cake and light 31 candles, and when everyone sings happy birthday, I let myself hear it instead of cringing with guilt. I blow out the candles and make a wish that I can fully heal from my childhood, that someday I can think about Danny without thinking about Dad's abuse. For the first time in 15 years, this day feels like mine instead of belonging to death. At midnight, after everyone has left and I'm washing dishes, my phone buzzes with a text from Mom. "Happy birthday," it says. Just those 2 words, but they feel significant because Dad is surely asleep upstairs and doesn't know she's sending it. A second text comes through with a photo attached. Me and Danny as kids at one of my early birthday parties. Both of us wearing party hats and smiling at the camera with cake-covered faces. We look so happy and normal, just siblings celebrating together before tragedy redefined everything. I save the photo to my phone and stare at it for a long time, remembering that version of my family before grief became a weapon. I text back a simple thank you, recognizing Mom's small rebellion for what it is, a limited attempt at connection that doesn't fix anything but acknowledges she's trying. I go to bed feeling strange, like I'm mourning and celebrating at the same time. Sad for what my family became, but grateful for what I'm building instead. 2 months pass with weekly therapy sessions and Tuesday support group meetings and phone calls with Mom that stay surface level. Then Vivian texts asking if I can talk, her message marked urgent. When I call, she tells me Dad had some kind of episode at work, chest pains and trouble breathing that sent him to the hospital. The doctors are running tests but think it's stress-related, not a heart attack. Vivian asks carefully if I want to visit him, and I have to sit with that question for 3 full days. I examine whether I have any obligation to a father who spent 15 years making me feel like an obligation to him, whether biology creates duty even when the relationship is poison. My therapist asks what I want, not what I should do, and I realize those are different questions with different answers. I want my father to face consequences for his choices. I want him to understand how much damage he caused. But I don't want to stand in a hospital room pretending we have a relationship worth saving when we both know that's not true. I decide to send flowers to the hospital with a card that says I hope he recovers. Nothing warm or personal, just a basic acknowledgement that I don't wish him dead, even though I also don't want him in my life. It's a middle ground that recognizes our biological connection without pretending we have a healthy relationship. The florist confirms delivery, and I feel relieved that I found a response that honors my boundaries while not being actively cruel. Mom calls that evening, her voice thick with emotion, thanking me for the gesture. I can hear both relief that I did something and disappointment that I didn't do more, that I didn't rush to his bedside like a good daughter should. She tells me Dad saw the flowers and card and didn't say anything, just stared at them for a long time before turning away. I don't know what response I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe this exact silence that confirms we're both done pretending. Dad gets released from the hospital 4 days later with a stack of prescriptions and instructions to reduce stress and attend therapy for anxiety management. Vivian calls with an update, telling me his doctor asked about family support during the discharge meeting. Dad apparently admitted he's estranged from his daughter, and the doctor suggested that unresolved family conflict might be contributing to his stress levels and health problems. Vivian says the doctor basically told Dad that holding on to anger and control was literally making him sick, that he needed to address his emotional issues before they caused actual physical damage. I feel a strange sense of validation hearing this, like an objective medical professional just confirmed what I've known for years, that Dad's behavior isn't normal grief but something more dysfunctional and harmful. It doesn't change anything between us, doesn't make me want to reconcile or forgive, but it feels important that someone with authority looked at our situation and saw Dad as the problem, not me. 3 months pass and I check my email one morning to find a message from Dad. The subject line says, "Can we talk?" And the body is 3 sentences asking if I'd meet him for coffee. No apology, no explanation, just the request to see me. I stare at the screen for 10 minutes trying to figure out how I feel about this. I forward the email to my therapist and ask if she has time for an emergency session. She fits me in that afternoon and we spend the hour talking through what meeting Dad might look like. She asks what I want from the conversation and I realize I don't know anymore. We role-play different scenarios where Dad says various things, and I practice maintaining my boundaries no matter what he throws at me. She reminds me I can leave at any time, that I don't owe him my time just because he asked for it. I draft a response that night setting clear conditions. Neutral location, no mom, 1 hour maximum. Dad agrees within 20 minutes. The coffee shop is halfway between our houses, a place neither of us has history with. I arrive 5 minutes early and pick a table near the exit so I can leave easily if I need to. Dad walks in exactly on time looking smaller than I remember, his face tired in a way that makes him look every one of his 60 years. The health scare left marks I can see even from across the room. We sit down across from each other and neither of us speaks for what feels like forever. He finally breaks the silence by saying he's been thinking about what I said at his party, that some of it has been hard to hear, but he can't stop thinking about it. Dad tells me his therapist is helping him understand he used grief as an excuse to control things when he felt powerless after Danny died. He admits he made my life harder, and that wasn't fair to me. It's not the full apology I deserve, not the acknowledgement of 15 years of damage, but it's more than I expected from him. I wait to see if he'll say more, but he just sits there looking sad and old. I tell him I'm willing to have occasional supervised contact, but our relationship will never be what it was. And honestly, it wasn't great before Danny died either. He flinches at that but nods slowly, accepting the boundary even though I can see it hurts him. I realize as I watch his face that he's grieving the loss of control, more than the loss of closeness we never really had. He wanted a daughter who would accept his rules forever, and instead, he got me. I stand up after 45 minutes because I don't need the full hour, and as I walk to my car, I feel something shift inside me. It's not forgiveness, and it's not reconciliation, but it's acceptance that this is what our relationship is now. I'm building a life where I can honor Danny's memory on March 15th and celebrate my own existence on the same day, and I don't need my father's permission for either one anymore.